Welcome to the Zachrilege cast, the one interview podcast that brings the best and brightest of the atheist, skeptic, and just plain cool community to your ears and eyes. This is episode 36 of the show, and I'm recording live on November 12th, 2015. I would again like to thank Jason Camo for being on the show 2 weeks ago, and I'm glad you got the joke when I said I was clearly the reason why you quit doing atheist podcasting. If I could knock down some more pins, I'll be the only game in town, and that is exactly not why I'm doing the show. So tonight we have on an authentic board-certified apostle. The original apostles are like the original formula of Coca-Cola, long gone, but Matthew the Apostle survives. He hosts his own show called In the Name of God, the podcast. And I met him in person at the legendary, to me at least, ReasonCon conference. How you doing tonight, Matthew?
I'm doing well. So I guess that's a legend of one, huh? That's what, one conference in a row for you?
That's one conference in a row. Yeah, when I heard that they're doing the conference again, I was like, well, that or Reason Rally next year, it's something to think about. You know, what in terms of traveling, what kind of budget do you have for that sort of thing? But yeah, once I heard it was 4 hours away, I had to go.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that there is a large enough community in the area where you're from, because I don't know if you've published that or made that public, but there's enough people going up. You could car ride up. You could ride up with Hugh, man. Have you had him on board yet?
I haven't on the show. I may have to do the avatar version with him. I don't know. He actually started showing his face on his account, so we'll see. But yeah, it's funny that I met Hugh for the first time in a different city because he lives here. And there were a couple other people who I met here first, Ken the Cookie Man as well.
Right.
He's an Atlanta guy, and I'm like, I met you in another state. And that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Well, and it's fun, though, because especially where you live, it's not known for, let's see if I can put this out in the most polite way, being well-reasoned, thought out, skeptical, critical, non-rednecky. That's the word I'm looking for. There's not a lot of non-hillbillies coming out of your neck of the woods.
Well, I mean, I'm in Atlanta, so I'm in a city, but there's a group, Gust. Hey, I'll mention you, Gust. I'm sorry. It's the first group that I actually went to and returned to that's in Atlanta. And it's about a 12-mile drive from where I live to there. And I pass probably 3 churches per mile, it seems. And they're all totally different denominations. I mean, you got like Southern Baptist, you got like a Korean church, you got everything. So
that would be the Korean Baptist churches?
Possibly. I don't know. The potlucks would probably be really good, though, so I'd give them that.
Well, I don't know how much you followed along in my particular migration west. I made a total of 10 cross-country trips because, well, I had the time. So it took a few months. We had real estate out here already, and it worked out pretty well. And one of the trips, I decided that I was going to count every single Christian or religious reference. So I went to the store and I bought one of those little, handheld clickers like you see going into a sporting event. And every time I passed one, like a church or a, I had all kinds of rules, but I would just press the number and keep track. And then in my notebook, because I'm a note taker, I kept track of all the secular or specifically atheistic type icons or references as well, so that I could actually determine the attack that we have against, the war on religion and how obviously the atheists and secularists are winning. I don't remember the exact tally, but, and everything had different points. For example, a church in its own right would only get, say, 1 point. I would click my little clicker one time. But if I went by a church and it had a crucifix out front, that would get 2, because that's 2 icons. And every now and then I'd come across these Baptist churches which had maybe 3 or 4 crosses plus a church. Holy crap. That was a 5 or 6 pointer right there. So I kept track of all this. And matter of fact, I even stopped in Colorado Springs. I was actually bringing something down to Las Vegas for a guy that does a small show down there. And he had some stuff that was still at his family home up in Massachusetts. So I had loaded it in my truck and brought it down, dropped it in Vegas, then drove up here to Reno. because this guy, you might have heard of him. His name is Penn Jillette. Do you know? Have you heard of him? Yeah. So no, but anyway, so I had brought the stuff across country for Penn. So put me right through Denver, and I'm like, I've got a listener from Colorado Springs. I'll just hop down there. Colorado Springs is where all the serious Rocky Mountain nut job fruit bag super Jesus clubs are. So the whole thing was done.
Is that the district where Gordon, is it Klingenschmidt is from?
Yeah. That's him. Klingenschmidt. Yeah. So, so I met this guy. He's one of my Twitter followers. Goes under @Humanist He is actually going to be a guest on my show, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so poor bastard, ex-army man. I think he had just got out of the army, and met me at a brew pub across me in a bar. I know, weird, but again, bear with me here. So, but it was pouring rain. This poor bastard came on his motorcycle. I felt so bad. So anyway, but so when the whole thing was done, I think I had something like 7,000 points for religious icons and iconography, and I had 2 for the secular atheist community. One of those was a roadside cleanup by the Miami Valley Atheists in Miami Valley, Ohio, and the other was a dinosaur museum someplace in Kansas or something. I figured that kind of counted. So, oh, by the way, I also threw Hobby Lobby into the religion iconography category, so they got 5 points for every Hobby Lobby.
Bonuses.
Yep.
Anytime I drive north to either Chattanooga or Nashville, there's a big. Well, there are tons of those 1-800-for-truth. I think call to talk about Jesus, and I think actually David Smalley once called them on his show, or somebody did in a podcast, and kind of had them in circles pretty quickly. But then there's a sign. I can't remember, Dalton or something. There's an area that they're like the carpet capital of Georgia, and they have a big sign that says Jesus is Lord, and you know it. Actually, no, but okay.
I actually went to if Matt from Atheism 101 ever listens to this, he'll be like, there's another goddamn thing that I've done. I went to school in Dalton, Georgia at Mohawk, at the Mohawk Industry Carpet Mill. They've got a training program. My father owned a home improvement carpet and paint store, which I bought and we owned for about, 6-7 years or so. And so I went down, I went through the training program, flew into Atlanta. And just like I said with the Christian counting, this time I did when I was driving from Atlanta up to Dalton, I counted Waffle Houses.
Oh yeah, there are infinite number of those around.
It's like every exit had at least one, and there were some that had more than one. But I've never been in a Waffle House sober.
Not many have. I think I went there once because I was going to have surgery, and it was like 5 a.m. It was the only place that was open, and I was like, I have 6 hours before I can, I have to eat. So they do that.
I thought you were going to tell us that you went to Waffle House for your surgery. I'm like, wow, they are actually multitasking.
Yeah, they got it going on. But I did want to mention I'm going to be highlighting a Michigan-based show later. So I'm drinking Michigan-based beers tonight. I'm drinking a Bell's Best Brown Ale. Bell's is a pretty solid brewery. And then later on we'll be transitioning to a New Holland Cabin Fever because the winter ales are coming. Winter is coming, although it's like 60 here in Atlanta. So we're wearing, jackets, and Matthew can laugh about that.
You know that we've already
got snow drifts.
Yeah, we've already had to shovel. But the ski areas are open up here. Mount Rose opened about a week or so back, and Heavenly and every place else is geared to go up at Lake Tahoe. They've got a couple feet of snow already. Looking to be a good year for those that want to go skiing. And when we get into our break, I'm going to go and upgrade my beer or my Diet Coke to a beer, and we can discuss whatever that is too.
Upgrade your Diet Coke to a beer, or your beer to a Diet Coke?
No, I'm just, like I said, I just got home not too long ago, and it's been one of those days. So I'm still up in the caffeine, and then I need to get that nulled out here before it gets too late.
I like that. That's I'd say that's the excuse. It's just a great time in craft brewing, so everything you get's pretty solid.
Yeah, so, we have a brew pub here in Carson City. It's about 10 miles away from where I live, called Lake Tahoe Brewing Company. and they have an amazing beer. And everything they do there, they do really well. They do wood-fired pizzas, and on Wednesday nights they have Geeks Who Drink Trivia. So you can usually find us there on Wednesday nights as well. So, and speaking of beer, this is very important. Are you using the Untapped app on your phone?
That's just something I can never get myself to do. I've downloaded it like 3 times and I've never put a beer on there. I don't know. I tend to post my beers to Twitter. That's what I do.
Well,
that's my unofficial version. I know I should do it, but
But this will actually post them to Twitter for you.
That's true, and I like the people who have the Untapped app, and they're like catching up, and they post a bunch of beers on there like at 2 in the afternoon. I'm like, way to go! They're like, no, it's just the app. I'm not actually drinking during the day. It's like, okay, right, whatever.
Exactly. No, but yeah, you can do that. It's pretty nifty, and it's nice to keep track, because if you do start drinking a lot of different types of craft brews, like I'm very specific in what I will and will not have again. You can check it, because I don't always remember the names, from one to the next. So,
well, that is true. I was at a bottle exchange on Tuesday, and at the end of the bottle exchange, 100 beers had been consumed, and there was no way I was keeping track of everything that was going on there.
What's a bottle exchange?
Basically, a bottle exchange is where people bring like their rare or special beers they've been saving, and they just open them up, and that's what happened.
Wow.
You go there, and these people they do trades. Like they basically get, let me get a beer that's tough to get here, and I'll trade it for one that's in another part of the country, and they get some really well-known stuff, and it was a lot of fun. And I had to end up at a place called Palookaville, where they sell like carnival type food after the fact to kind of even things out.
I understand that's a one-way trip to Palookaville.
It's a one-way trip. That's right. I used to be a contender. I think that's how it goes.
That's exactly it. You know who that is?
I don't remember.
Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando and Streetcar Named Desire. Or not Streetcar. Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's too early to get our movie references wrong, huh?
Yeah, well, anybody that knows me, anytime I make any sort of a media reference, I'm probably wrong. Oh, boy. So what else we got?
Can we talk about your kind of personal religious background? Like, were you raised in a church or a faith?
No, absolutely not. I'm one of the rare, I don't like to call myself an activist, but I suppose that to a certain level I am. Those of us, that is a great color. Wow. Does the light even pass through that?
This is the Game of Thrones. They do Gang does a beer by them, but this is actually the Cabin Fever.
You do know that that's where I used to live, right? Where Omegang is made.
I didn't know it was right there, but
yeah, next valley over from me, Cooperstown, New York. That's actually a Duval owned, and their brewery. Look it up online. Their brewery is just beautiful, beautiful. So
weirdly, the only beers I've had by them that I haven't liked are the ones that are from Game of Thrones. Everything else I've had by them has been really good. For some reason, I don't know. But anyway.
Well, don't they do like Black Eyed Raven or something like that too?
Yeah, I haven't. I had to get a glass for this bottle exchange, so I got the first and the third because I've done 3 of them. And I have the second one like in my little wine fridge, which is a beer fridge. So I think when the next season of Game of Thrones happens, I'm just going to open them all, and there will be other people there, not just me, because I would die. But I'm sorry to interrupt your story. I think your story is similar to mine in that it's like, never really. Yeah.
No, it's funny because I can probably count on one hand of, what I would consider our circle of friends, the people that we met at ReasonCon, or I've met at some other cons, or that are doing shows like this or blogging or what have you. I'm only a handful that have not had any religious epiphany. I was raised, let me rephrase that. I was baptized as an Episcopalian, which is Catholic light, but that's pretty much the last time that we went to church. I did, one of the schools I got thrown out of, because there was more than one, was a Catholic school that, they tried to make it very religious, but the way that I like to describe my religious, investigation is kind of like reading Ayn Rand. What happened was I had a girlfriend when I lived in Manhattan, and she loved Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead, and Atlas Shrugged, and all that other crap that complete nut job lady wrote. And so she's like, "You've got to read this book." It was, I think it was The Fountainhead, about the architect. She goes, "You will love this because the protagonist in it is a questioning, anti-authoritarian kind of guy, and that's just, it's such an individual. It's just so much like you. You're going to love this. You're going to love it. You're going to love it." So I started reading it, and I don't know. I was probably into it by 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it was. And she said, "So how you liking the book?" I'm like, "It's okay." She goes, "Don't worry about it. It's going to grab you, and you're not going to put it, you won't be able to put it down. You're going to love it." I'm like, "Okay." So I kept on reading, and another week or so goes by, and she said, "So where are you now? How are you liking it?" I'm like, it's just a story. It's nothing, it's no big deal. I'm not getting it. I'm not understanding why everybody loves this. She goes, "It'll grab you. Where are you in the book?" I'm like, "Page 400, it's like a 600-page book or whatever." And she goes, she took the book out of my hands and said, "Yeah, if it hasn't got you by now, it's not going to." And that was religion for me, because what happened was, I would go to church because I was in school where that was, going to chapel was part of it. I would read the Bible verses in front of everybody because that was part of it. And I mean, I found it all interesting and fascinating in certain extents, but it never grabbed me. And I'm sitting there going, and like, why am I the only one who's not getting this? And sure enough, it just never caught. So I haven't done religion, so to speak. Like, like you talked to Bobby and Ashley and those guys, and pretty much nearly everybody that I've talked to is coming out of a very strict or problematic, is probably a better way, religious background, except for, well, apparently you and me.
Yeah, we kind of missed out on whatever that trauma was. I mean, the closest I had was like in high school dating a girl, and she said I was sad. I'm sad because you're going to hell. And I'm like, "Well, why is that?" She's like, "Well, you don't go to the same church I go to." I'm like, "Well, why does that make any sense?" And that was really all there was to it. That's pretty much the end of that.
That's right. I look at, even like some of my friends now, I'm really kind of looking at across the board. I have one family that I'm, relatively close with, that are very Catholic, but that is probably more being, first generation Irish in North America type stuff, and coming out of the Irish Catholic Church. But other than that, everybody else is like, "Well, of course I don't believe that." Like, well, stand up and tell people, because no one gives a shit. Anyway, so yeah, so religion sucks ass. We covered that. And interestingly enough, I do this peculiar little podcast that discusses it. Did you know that?
Well, I was wondering about that, because for the people who are religious, it's kind of like they want to tell their story, and they want to go, "Hey, by the way, I believe this too, and now I don't, and here's why." So what got you into transitioning to going, "No, I want to do a show and talk about this. This is important enough to actually take the time to get to the studio together and, rustle up some minions and actually get graphic design going." Look at you.
Okay, so here's
literally look at him when he talks, because this is exactly what Matthew looks like. I've seen him in person, and trust
That's right.
me,
See my butt.
This is amazing.
So first things first, the graphic design. Are you familiar with what that particular piece of artwork is?
I am not.
Okay, it is Michelangelo's Heavenly Bodies, painted on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Now, why it's fascinating to me, because I'm a history nerd. My undergraduate degree is in history, and that I'm a nerd. So if you back out of that photograph, if you can imagine, if you look it up online and you back out, what you see is the angry God pointing and banishing this guy. Whoops, sorry about that. Just hit the mic. Banishing him from heaven. But the problem is that the person that's being banished from heaven is God. So it's God banishing God from heaven. So it makes no sense. And I'm like, perfect, because my entire podcast revolves around people who claim to be religious, claim to be believers in whatever their particular deity is. And what do? They act exactly the opposite way. So I thought it was a pretty good juxtaposition. So how did I get into doing this? So here's how this happened. I was a guest on Penn's Sunday School on April 20th, 2014. So if anybody wants to know more about me, I talk about my background specifically in there, some of the stuff that I told you that I wouldn't talk about tonight. So it's all in there. And one of the things that we were talking about in that particular episode was the missing Malaysian flight, that 777 that just vanished out of, off the coast of Australia. Talked about that for a good part of the show. And when the whole thing was done, we were hanging out at the Slammer and having a little barbecue, which was kind of cool. Except that I really wanted to go, this is going to sound horrible. I really wanted to go to the Atomic Testing Museum. So think about this. We're hanging out at the Slammer having a barbecue with Penn and his family and some friends. And all I want to do is leave to go to the Atomic Testing Museum. My wife's like, no, you don't leave this place to go do that. I'm like, can't we leave now? Anyway, so we did that. But what I was fascinated by was the technology, the actual mechanics of putting together the podcast is really, really simple. I mean, it's, just ripping down the files, everybody can always improve a little bit on different areas, on my show especially, but it's not rocket surgery. Anybody can do it. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And one of the things I liked about Penn Sunday School as a show, not, the individual personalities aside, is that they would do a news story, usually about halfway through the show, and they would talk about some basically religious or skeptical nut job, somebody who'd done something completely idiotic, and everybody'd laugh at them. But they stopped doing that, and I don't know why, and I never really looked into it. So after doing the show, we went up to Reno because we knew that we were going to be moving out here eventually, and we were kind of looking at some property neighborhoods and towns that we wanted to consider. But by pure coincidence, Dan Barker, the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, was giving a speech the following night at the University of Nevada, Reno, for the Secular Student Alliance. And we had some friends that we had met at a skeptics meetup some years prior who were going to be there. So we decided to go up and listen to Dan speak. And what he did, talked about his past and everything else, but there was one young man in the audience who was, I believe, a Christian. Yeah, I guess he was a Christian because he was doing Bible quotes or whatever. And doing Bible quotes with Dan, who was also a preacher in his previous life, would be like you trying to outquote Bobby C. in the Bible. It's never going to happen, because the guy has it down cold. So, but what Dan Barker did was very nice. He didn't, basically tell the guy, shut the fuck up and sit down. This guy would say, read a verse or whatever, and Dan would say, no, read the entire verse, or take a look at this word. This word was used this way. And what he was doing was constantly shutting down this guy's claims of supernatural deities somehow, existing, essentially. So it was really nice to see that happen. Then I joined the FFRF. I'm like, I like these guys. I like what they do. So I joined the next day. And if your members or your listeners are not members of the FFRF, you should join. It's not very expensive. But once a month, you get their Free Thought Today newspaper. In the back of the Free Thought Today newspaper is usually 3 pages of very small type, like get my glasses on, very small type, called Black Collar Crime. And it is a rundown of the previous 30 days, who's been arrested, that was a clergy member or somehow or other affiliated with the church, who has been sentenced, who has been released, who has been, pardon me, whatever the case may be, whatever their interaction is with the legal process, it's in there. And I mean, it's pages and I can't even tell you how many are on any given one. And I said, you know what? Nobody's reporting this stuff. And that's why I put it all together. I came home, went down to, I don't know, Radio Shack, Walmart, Target, one of those places, and found a microphone on the shelf and said, I need that microphone, plugged it in and started plugging away. That's it.
It's intriguing, the whole, preachers behaving badly, because as someone who follows the National Football League and football closely, anytime a player does anything, it gets in the news. Like, it was news that the NFL went 30 days without a player being arrested. But the news about the preachers and the religious people, that usually doesn't get that kind of attention.
No, and it's unfortunate.
Because it happens so often, or people just don't think it happens. I don't know.
Well, I think it's probably option two. People don't think it happens. And if they do acknowledge that it happens, I think that they're assuming it's somebody else's church. I'm not Catholic, therefore it's not my club that's molesting children. I'm not a Baptist. I'm not. Do you have an explicit tag on here? Have we already covered?
Say anything you want.
I'm not a member of the Southern Baptist Convention, so why do I care that their bishop was fucking a dog? And that happened.
Yeah, I know. It's like if anybody's going to bring up a random story and it's actually a real story, that's you. He's read it. He has the scars.
Yeah. Actually, the one of the senior leaders of the Southern Baptist Convention, it was just over probably 14 months ago. It was in August of 2014. Was arrested for soliciting sex on Craigslist, which I think Craigslist was specifically designed for. But the problem is that he was trying to solicit sex from a dog. Well, I take that back. We were never able to prove that it was a dog, but it was definitely an animal of some sort. So, I mean, so I don't want to be inaccurate. I don't want anybody to think I'm making stuff up. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
that's what happens.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So, and the best thing is, unlike shows like your friends down there in Valdosta that have to, actually write and script and be creative, my shows are all scripted. I mean, I write out every single word that you hear me say, and it's about a 5,000 word essay every week. But I don't mind because I like to write. But I don't have to be creative because the material is already there.
Yeah, it's not hard to find. We're going to keep talking about Matthew's amazing show. We're going to do a quick live read. So if Matthew wants to pick up a beer or whatever.
Going for beer, I'll be back.
Of course, this is a short live read, but hey, I can vamp if I have to. So a show that is a little more skeptical than atheistical is the Cellar Door Skeptics. They are out of the underrated territory of Michigan, where they manufacture amazing beer and quality skeptics who like to talk about it. Sure, like most podcasts, they like to keep it under 3 hours, but it's good listening. So the Chris's and Christophers compel you to listen. It's one of those shows that they actually reached out to me and asked me to do a promo. And I'm like, promo? Wait, that requires me actually recording other material. Someday I will actually do this. I will actually get something on this wall behind me because it's going to sound like a Super Bowl bouncing in a phone booth with my voice sometimes in this room, but that's the way it goes sometimes. But that's a good show to listen to because it is more skeptical than atheistic. I think they were talking about marijuana laws in their previous show. And you can't not like the Michigan beer scene. I mean, New Holland and Bell's, everything I've had for them has been very quality stuff. So you should check it out. And if they're in Georgia and you have a beer stop, you're going to be able to find it.
And I'm back.
Coughing. Maybe he's here. Yeah.
Yep.
What did you grab?
I grabbed a Blue Paddle Pilsner from the New Belgium Brewing Company in Fort Collins, Colorado.
I remember being in Arizona many, many years ago and having a Fat Tire.
Yep.
And it was years later that I had it again here, and it was kind of a go-to beer. And I'm proud that Fat Tire has shown up. It was on Breaking Bad, and there's another TV show that I watched that they actually had that. I'm like, hey, they didn't grab a generic beer or, a macro. They actually grabbed, New Belgium's almost up to like Sam Adams now. They're around so much.
Yeah, and the nice thing, there's a lot of nice things about it, but one of the nice things about the New Belgium Brewing Company is they're an employee-owned brewery. So it would be nearly impossible for them to be bought out by one of the big guys because, of course, everybody, all the employees would actually have to agree to it. And then they, after you've worked for them for 1 year, you get a bicycle. I think that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's right. The bike's their symbol. And I think they've opened a second one in Asheville. I don't know. It was somewhere in the Southeast.
That wouldn't surprise me. Asheville.
Nevada opened a second one. It's these really big microbreweries are opening second locations around the country.
I used to ski as a National Ski Patrol guy at a local mountain, and one of the other ski patrollers worked for the local contract brewing company. It was actually, God, I can't remember which beer it was initially, but it was like Schmidt's beer or something like that. But basically, it had closed down, but the facility was still modern enough that they started doing a lot of contract brewing. So Sam Adams, for example, would make their beer in their brewery, but they would have Sam Adams employees there to make the beer. So it's not like the same guys that are pumping out Coors Light, for example, are pumping out the Sam Adams. They actually have the Sam Adams brew guys there, which is pretty nice way to keep the quality up. But this guy would bring whatever like the next batch of beer coming out was to ski patrol night, because once we came off the mountain, usually about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, we'd hang out in the patrol room. It's like, what'd you bring this time? And I remember we brought like a cranberry lembec or some horrible beer, but it was still free and it was still Sam Adams, so it's not so bad.
Yeah, Sam Adams is known as kind of a mainstream. You see it everywhere if you go to an airport, but they do have some limited edition stuff. It's pretty solid stuff. I almost grabbed one for my bottle exchange, but there had a couple other ones that caught my eye.
Yeah, I'm down to my last bottle of summer ale from them, so I'm kind of waiting because that's probably one of my favorite beers. That and the Oktoberfest are my go-to at home beers.
Yeah, the seasonals like the Cabin Fever. I just saw that for the first time this weekend. I'm like, yes, because it's only available for like 3 months. And I'm like,
yep,
I get as much as I can, and then when they've run out. It's a sad day indeed, but we soldier on somehow. What about, you kind of straddle the line like between the funny and the kind of horrific stories. How tough is it to do that on your show? Like with your, I think it was 2 episodes ago, we were talking about the church on the reservation in Oklahoma where the church leader was 82 and he was caught with a 7-year-old, and the church was kind of supporting him for a while.
Well, it was peculiar because that one became really odd, and I suspect because it's somewhat of a cloistered community, the local reservation, that the news media probably didn't get the same kind of access to the members of the community like they would if, say, it was in Detroit, for example. When you have that close knit of a community, it's very difficult for someone to step up and lean against the prevailing wind, so to speak. But the young lady who stood up and said, "This is bullshit," is a rock star. I mean, I don't remember her name off the top of my head now, but I sent her a note on Facebook and she never got back to me. But the fact that she stood up against all the power in not only in her tribe, but in the church and everything else is almost unheard of. So, when you see superhuman strength like that, it's kind of like the guys up in Wyoming at Waiting for Wrath. They have that they close their show with, the hope and redeeming qualities that is some good left in the world. And it's the same type of thing. You see somebody doing the good things for the good reasons. It's like, it makes it worth doing. So how I avoid getting stressed out and depressed about the incidents is that I don't want to say I don't care, because I obviously I do, because of what I'm doing, but there's nothing that I can do to change that from where I'm sitting here in the desert. But what I can do, and what you can do on your show and everybody else, is that when you talk about these things, in theory, every now and then we cross over and get into the ears of somebody who is part of that club. And if that happens enough and they stay on board long enough, then they can realize that, oh, wait a minute, it's not just the Southern Baptist, convention that needs the doggy loving. It's everywhere. And here's the really, really horrible statistic. Only dealing in sex crimes. I'm not going to, this is excluding all the other stuff. And by all the other stuff, I mean murder. I mean embezzlement, property thefts, and everything else. Let's keeping all that stuff off the table. On average, we are finding in the news at least 1, if not 2, religious clerics or members of the church being arrested every single day for some sort of sexual deviance. And I don't mean sexual deviance like, oh, he likes to hang out and wear black leather. I mean doing something that gets them arrested. More than 1 a day. That's pretty crappy.
Yeah, and it seems like it all came from the Catholic Church saying, "Oh, we can't have these guys getting married and having property rights, so celibacy."
Right.
And bad.
And that would be a true statement, but you probably have already noticed if you've been following along on my show that I do my best to not go after the Catholics because that's the low hanging fruit. Anybody can do that. And I mean, holy crap! I did a bit 2 or 3 weeks ago. I guess there's a lot of stuff out of Nigeria and out of Africa. I can't understand why, but that stuff doesn't even make it into the show very often because it is so far away. That my fear is that some teetering Christian, almost ready to leave the faith, comes across my show and they're sitting in, I don't know, Texas, and they're like, "Well, I don't give a shit about that. That guy's in Africa." So I try not to, I want to keep it local-ish without, shoving it down their throat, so to speak. So, yeah, it's. I mean, right now I've got about 490 backlog stories that I could pull from. 490.
Now, did you, talking about names, like, did you purposely go for God in your name so that religious people would find your show and go, "Wait a second"?
That's exactly why I do it. And that's also why I don't have an explicit tag, because my thought is that somebody, and it's always listed in the religion and spirituality category. So what happens is, and I know this happens because I usually get a really snide email about, I don't know, an episode or two after the person subscribes, but people are looking for God and Jesus, and those are the tags that I put into it. And they find it and they go, "Oh, look, oh, look," and they recognize the fleeting God out of heaven, and they don't put it all together, and then they listen, and the people are, I don't want to say people are stupid because it's not that they're stupid. They're just, people don't realize that pretty much everything that I do is calculated. The opening music to my show is O Fortuna, which is a Carmen Burana by Orff. That was done in, oh gosh, I'm thinking the 1930s, early 1900s. But anyhow, what it is it's actually a series of writings by renegade priests back in, I want to say the 1100s or the 800s, something like that. So basically these guys had like all this blasphemy and the church sucks, and they were ridiculing the church and everything else. And that all those documents are what Orff turned into his music. And that's why I use it. Sounds really cool, but nobody picks up on why it's as funny as it is to actually have that up there, because people are not history nerds like I am. But then we close the every episode with a live recording from the 1930s or 40s. That was Black Spiritual Chain Gang in the prison music that was recorded by who the hell knows where, I think in Mississippi. So I think it's kind of nice because you've got the you started out with the renegade priest, ridiculing and making fun of the church, and then at the end everybody's in jail. So I've run the gambit.
You go to jail and you go to jail. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly.
That's how it works out. So could you talk up, because I mentioned minions, but you have a couple assistants who help you out. Can you give them a little love?
I do. Letha the Apostle and Pixie the Apostle. Now, Pixie is a Canadian. She's a hot shit. I mean, she tracks more podcasts than I do. And what had happened was, Muse the Apostle had been doing a lot of work for me. She had been pimping the show, and as horrible as it sounds, guys on Twitter will respond to women posting pretty much anything. Guys on Twitter will not respond to guys doing, well, anything, unless there's pictures of boobs involved. So Pixie and Letha, both women obviously, have done very well to kind of pimp the show. So Pixie had sent me a note asking if I was doing anything on Facebook, and I'm really not very much of a Facebook user, even in my my private life side. Pretty much the only thing that happens is my untapped posts go there, and then every now and then something that's going to annoy some of my right-wing friends I'll put up there just for something to do. But other than that, I don't really do much on it. And she's like, well, I'll run your Facebook page. I'm like, oh, you're my new best friend. So if you go to the Facebook page, which is, I guess what, facebook.com in the name of God, she does all the posting over there. And it's amazing. She finds stories that I haven't even seen necessarily, gets them out and interacts with the community. So that's just great. And then Letha the Apostle is, I don't even have enough nice things to say about her. We could probably spend the rest of the evening just talking about how cool she is. She went up to the FFRF convention, which was pretty cool. Took talk about Herculean effort to get there. She had some problems with her vehicle, and I mean, just one thing after the other. But she got in and wasn't really feeling well for the weekend. But she troopered on and loved the event, which was a lot of fun to see. But she engages online with about 10,000 followers from her Twitter feed last time we had talked about it. And she'll be up there 3 or 4 times a week, basically pumping the show and pimping the show out to her followers as well. And I mean, I'm picking up, at least there probably 6 to 12, new Twitter followers a week. And I can always tell, when we've had a good week because my downloads for the show go up too, which are, doing far better than I could ever have expected. And part of that also becomes, the result of the newest thing in secular podcast activism, which is the Secular Outreach Network. You might have heard of that.
I have, and I was going to ask you about that, but look at you doing the segue for me. It's like you do this for a living or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, I'm doing it for a living, and that's one of the things I wanted. But let me just before we move on to the Secular Outreach Network. Last year, and I'm not actually in a position to do it this year, timing wise. Last year we did a fundraiser for the FFRF memberships. Bobby C had worked this out to do like student memberships for people that wanted to become members of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and I opened up a Patreon account specifically for that. And then and by we, I mean, well, me, matched it dollar for dollar for everybody that donated something. And we were able to get about, I think, $250 or maybe $300 to Bobby C to purchase memberships for people that wanted to join FFRF. It was kind of a big deal for us. I really, really liked it. I was a little bit disappointed in some of the reactions from some of the people who were gifted this thing, other than oh, thanks. I'm like, you know what? Screw you, dude. It's like, I'm a very generous person. I'll go out of my way for anybody that anybody that needs it. But, the only thing I really ask is a legitimate acknowledgement, not even a thank you, just a, wow, this is really pretty cool. So I'm really looking for something like that would be nice, but we didn't even get that. So guess how much effort I'm putting into it this year. So anyway, but back to the Secular Outreach Network. So what happened was, let's see. I was in Georgia about 2 months before, I guess it was actually, it's January, February timeframe, before the ReasonCon in 2015. So I've been doing the show for a little while, and one thing led to another, and I found myself looking to overnight in Savannah. So I sent Bobby C a note saying, dude, I'm going to be in Savannah. And he's like, well, let's go to dinner. So the 3 of us went out to dinner and we talked for a little bit. And he's the one that actually talked me into going to ReasonCon. Shortly after ReasonCon, Bobby joined up with David Smalley's network. And I can't remember what that's, Secular Media.
I think it's
right. Yep. And it's Phil Ferguson's on board there. And I mean, everything they do there, I think is very, very well done. But they have kind of like this, what I find would be a restrictive umbrella, although I would fit it, which is that they are all PG-13. They are very specific that they are not going to use language which is such that they can't put it out in a PG-13 venue, and that's perfectly acceptable. My show is PG-13, but I would have a problem being forced to stay under that mandate. So that kind of bugs me, but that's not my thing. So I've been thinking about it since then. So about 2 months ago, I guess, maybe 3, I started putting this whole thing together, thinking about how we could have a network that could spread the word, spread the gospel of secularism and humanism and atheism, whatever your particular favorite label is, because I'm not much of a labeler. And I reached out to some shows that I felt were in the same venue, that had the same feeling of that I have, because I'm not going to certainly take on a show that I don't know, that follows football, because who the fuck watches football anymore? Sorry about that.
Heathens, only heathens.
But anyway, so in doing all of that, so I reached over to Paul, who did Koranify Me for almost 3 years, is now doing Atheist Apocalypse. I had met and been a guest on Waiting for Wrath, gosh, I don't know, 3 or 4 times anyway, because I would always wind up staying in Laramie on my cross-country drives. It was a perfect stopping point. So being in Wrathful Studios, also known as the Petri dish, because I caught a chest cold like you wouldn't believe for about 2 months because of those fuckers. So
you drink out of one of their beer glasses?
No, Wrathful Studios is smaller than one of those half-sized phone booths, man. You get in there and you've got Shay, who, by the way, looks something like a cross between Chewbacca and a Wookiee. And Chewbacca is a Wookiee, isn't he?
Yeah. It's like it's
Chewbacca
a cross
and
of 2
Bigfoot.
things.
There we go.
Yeah. Chupacabra, I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, so we basically, I just floated this out to them and to Matt and Tim over at Atheism 101 and Bryce. Do you listen to Bryce's podcast, by the way? Naked Mormonism?
I've only heard a couple episodes.
Oh, dude.
But everybody just says the best things.
He's another one that I could spend the night on. I mean, for somebody as young as he is, to have the knowledge that he has, the research that he does, and his delivery is so spot on. He's actually one of my favorite podcasts, I think, probably hands down. And I'm not a Mormon, but so we reached out to all these guys and said, "Look, this is what I'm thinking about. What do you guys think?" And some of the feedback was very reinforcing, but also very deliberate. Someone would say, "Well, I think that we need to do this, but we need to make sure that we're including this and this and this." So it wasn't just a dictate. It wasn't me walking in and saying, "I want to do this and you guys can be on board." It became a collective. So right now we've got Paul Sading, who is Paul Sading Productions. He does Atheist Apocalypse, and he's also launching a new podcast called The Q Podcast, which is going to still deal with a little bit with the Quran, as I understand this. And again, if we're talking media, which means I've probably got this wrong. So it's going to deal with a lot of humanism stuff. It's going to be dealing with kind of like the social upheavals, so to speak, without having to, as Paul and I, because we're in touch a lot, talk about padding the corners. You're not going to get any trigger warnings on his, because his show, like my show, is we're not here to protect you. If you need protection, you need pillows on the corners of your coffee table, then fucking sit in your house and shut the door off. That's it. It's like, shut yourself off. He's a real guy, and should be a real good show. We also have Tim and Matt from Atheism 101. They I was just on their show. Those guys do an amazing amount of research as well, and they are the other couple of history nerds. In case you haven't put this all together, you've got Bryce, history nerd, Mormon Church, Matt and Tim, general history nerds. Although Tim's more of a Central and South American history focus, which who cares? Didn't we already kill all those people when we came in with like smallpox and stuff in the 1600s?
We tried.
I thought so. That venereal diseases. That's what the other one was. So they do an amazing. Their background work is really, really cool too. Just was on their show last week. I think it just dropped this week, talking about the Dalai Lama. I don't know how much you know about the Dalai Lama, but he's a piece of shit. So we talked about that, and then we have, of course, the clan from Waiting for Wrath. That would be Shay, Aaron, Jen, Steve. Did I miss anybody? And occasionally Big Gay Jim, who is, well, big and gay, and one of the loveliest men I've ever met in my entire life. Love that guy. So And they also do a little bit of drinking up there. You might know that. So
yeah, I had like half of their show on, and I think I'm actually going to be on their show in the next week or two.
Oh, good.
Finally, the exchange has come back. The funny thing is, for their show, I got a beer from Utah, Unita, I think, one of the Indian tribes, was the brewery. And I actually got a beer, and they're like, "We couldn't get it." I'm like, "You're in Wyoming. You're actually closer, and I'm in
You could
Georgia."
walk.
And I got a beer from Salt Lake City that wasn't 3.2%. So yeah,
Which beer is that?
Unita was the brewery, and I can't remember what the type was. It might have been a black IPA. It's a little bitter for me.
Is it their? They have like a black-eyed sheep or something like that, or black sheep or something. Yeah, I think I was sitting in again weird sitting in a bar in Salt Lake City, and they had that on tap. Cool. Yeah, those guys are great anyway. My wife and I were going to try and get up there this fall, but it's just not working out. So I mailed them the advent calendar of beer, and it weighed 35 pounds because there's 35 pounds worth of beer, and you're supposed to drink one beer every day. You open up the little doors like an old-fashioned advent calendar, and you pull the beer out. So I don't know what they're going to do with it, but
that sounds like a good calendar. I need one.
Well, but here's the problem. I paid more for the shipping than I did the beer because I shipped it UPS, and you can't ship alcohol UPS. So what I sent was vintage survival water. Huh? That was pretty good.
Vintage water.
So anywai, I don't know what they're going to do with it, but so anyway, so the Secular Outreach Network was born. We currently, like I said, we have the 5 shows with the 4 content providers, and our plan is over time to start bringing in some other content providers, both bloggers who are making their presence known, so to speak, but want to branch out a little bit, and video bloggers like yourself and other podcasters. But there's no specific criteria. Really, what it boils down to, I mean, we have some, I want to say hard and fast rules, but things like you have to obviously be current. Nothing pisses me off more than finding a podcast online going, "Oh, this looks great." Oh, wait, they stopped doing it in 2012. So whatever your calendar is, if you do it once a year, once a month, once a week, as long as people are staying up with their calendar and they're current, and of course, the quality and so on else is all addressed. That gets you considered. And then really what it boils down to is the personality of the content provider, because as Aaron pointed out, is that we're all friends. I mean, personally, straight up, we all know one another. Pretty much everybody's met everybody. I think I'm not positive, but everybody's kind of met everybody. And then you don't want to piss somebody off by saying, "Hey, Bubba, your audio quality is crap," and then have them pout forever. So, if you can't put up with guys being friends and girls being friends and putting out a quality product, you probably don't want to come on board. So, I think that your show has the potential if you put a little bit of work into it and kind of, make, you and I already talked about this a little bit in our email back and forth about this. I think that you would actually be a real good asset to the network. And I would lobby for you in our secret board meetings, just like Donald Trump had his secret board meetings.
I know, but don't you have to have shave my head and grow a goatee to be involved with this, or is that
no? You have to shave your ass, and
okay.
And by that I mean donkey, not what you're thinking. So,
of course, yeah, because who would think that?
Right.
It's not that kind of club. I don't know.
Actually, Paul and I are the only ones that shave our heads. Yeah, Matt and Tim don't. Although Matt, depending on which way the light, I imagine. Yeah. But yeah. So it's going to grow a little bit, and like I said in our little weird segue, once the network was up and running, I could tell that I was picking up listeners right away. People who would listen to somebody else's show that didn't know my show was out there, and it's gone the other way as well. So that's pretty cool. So we're pretty happy with it so far.
Well, cross promoting is important, and I didn't do the timing very well because I haven't done live reads in a while. So even though we're like 5 minutes from the end, I'm going to go ahead and do the second one here because I did promise myself. I didn't promise anybody. I always make it a secret who I'm going to, pump, whatever, all that good stuff that can be taken out of context, which I like to do. So do it to me. It's perfectly fine. The Atheist podcast, which I believe one apostle was on last week. They have Canadians, Corin and Chris, who actually talks. He seems really quiet a couple times I've had him on, but on this show he's not, every Friday night. And each Atheist podcast, for some reason, has to be at least as long as a Judd Apatow movie, so they go on for 2.5, 3 hours. They are irreverent, they're funny, and Chris impersonates people, which is nice. So check out the Theist, and that's a Canadian before theist. Not as hard to spell as my show name, but close.
Yeah, they're great people. You met Corinne and Chris at ReasonCon as well, right?
I know, it was like pre-relationship, so when they started getting together, I'm like, wait a second, I remember seeing the two of them, but I didn't remember seeing the two of them. So,
well, the problem is that you didn't see the two of them a lot because they were gone a lot during the ReasonCon. I think they were spending a little quality time. I don't really know. I don't ask personal questions.
So cool to see these connections made because it just happened yesterday that Zandy and Nick Morgan actually got married because they're, as I said, I think they're as far as two human beings could be on the planet. Like he was in Queensland, Australia, and she's in, I think, Montgomery, Alabama. That's not Montgomery. It's Alabama. Montgomery-ish.
Yeah, she's in fuck sweat, Alabama.
And he came to visit, and a month later they got married. And he's only here for 89 days, but I'm pretty sure he'll be back. He'll be back.
Well, I think he can stay now, can he? Isn't that part of the deal?
I'm not sure how that works, but
well, I mean, as long as he's on
the deal, yeah.
If he's on this side of the wall when Trump puts it up, well, he's all set.
Yeah, the Great Wall. That's exciting stuff.
The Great Wall of Trump.
Like when so anyway, you did talk about the Republicans and the whole debate. I keep waiting for them to say, "Okay, we're just kidding. Here are our real candidates," but I don't know if that's going to happen this time.
I've said this to I don't know if I've said it on any of my shows or any of the interviews I've been doing, but I'm actually politically agnostic at this point because I don't believe that there's any honest politicians because no one's ever provided me any proof. But I'm not out ruling out the fact that there could be. So that there is the political agnosticism, and honestly, I'm probably going to sit this election out for the first time in my entire life because there's nobody that I can vote for. And what's fascinating about that is that I did a few years as a private pilot, or we'll call it a corporate pilot because that's the lay term, but it was a charter pilot flying the Learjet series and a little bit in the Cessna Citation series as well. But we had the contract for the John Kerry campaign when John Kerry was running for president, and we were flying all the VIPs around. So I flew Al Sharpton, I flew Jesse Jackson, and I flew Hillary Clinton and a bunch of other people. And Hillary Clinton is, I mean, honestly, probably the top 5 or 10 nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. And it's really weird because she was incredibly polite, generous, and fun and casual. But we were literally sitting on the wing of a Learjet in, Scranton, Pennsylvania, and with her Secret Service agent, who was a young lady, all like just casually hanging out. And it was just a very pleasant time. And I suspect if she was able to translate that and portray that in her public persona, that she'd get further. But I don't really care because I'm not going to vote for her because I'm not going to vote for anybody. So.
Well, I'm attempting maybe on a show coming up. So Bill from Barroom Atheist and Eli Bosnick doing a debate over which atheist candidate could be running for president because they both have announced they're running for president. So you never know.
I knew that Bill is, and I know Bill. I have not met Eli. I'm familiar with him just through the Scathing Atheist podcast. They have a movie podcast or something out now, don't they?
God awful movies. Yep.
Yeah, I have not. I haven't put that in my queue. I listen to podcasts when I am working. Or, I'm on the projects around the house here, and since I no longer live in an antique farmhouse, which I lived and still own, so if anybody needs a property in upstate New York, which I still own on the East Coast, I would listen to just audio podcasts so that listen to all kinds of stuff. Now I live in a modern house and doesn't need quite as much work, so I spend my time in the desert on a dirt bike or in the airplane, and neither one of those are conducive to listening to stuff that you have to pay attention to. So anyway, so I should probably add that to the queue is where I'm going with all that.
It's a tough queue. Every time I listen to a new show, I'm like, man, there's just too much good stuff out there. I can't, I might have to listen to them fast. I don't know. Depends on the voice.
And I, my friend Chris, every now and then you'll hear me talk about him on my podcast because he's the only person to give me a 4-star review on iTunes. So anyway, he is actually a forester. So he runs around the woods managing standing forests for New York State. He was listening to Adam Carolla's podcast, and Carolla just basically made some sort of offhanded remark of, well, I'm sure we don't have any lumberjacks listening to this podcast. And Chris was like, what the fuck? I'm right goddamn here. But anyway, yeah. So, when you get, it's kind of antisocial to put your earbuds in, sit next to your wife, girlfriend, or well, both, and not talk to either of them because you're listening to something. So, yeah.
It's hard to do. So I haven't done this in a few weeks. So this is the time of the show where I say, hey, is there anything you'd like to ask me?
What's your cat's name?
I have 2 cats named Scatman and Soy Cuba.
Now, Scatman as in Crothers or shit?
As in Carruthers, a friend of mine was having his first kid, and he asked for baby name suggestions. And we're like, what's the worst name? And Scatman was the choice.
Oh, that's outstanding.
And Soy Cuba's from a very pro-communist documentary that for some reason I watched, and the entire movie, it was during like the revolution. It was like, Soy Cuba, Soy Cuba. And it just stuck in our heads. We're like, you know what? Because we had 2 cats and we're like, they're never going to die. So how about we name our cats that we get in the future Scatman and Soy Cuba? And then within 6 months, both our cats died. So 5 weeks later, we obtained more cats. And sadly, they don't like being on the show, so they don't really show up on the podcast.
I'm guessing that you have not been to Cuba?
Nope.
Okay. So I've been to Cuba because I've been everywhere.
You have?
Yes, I have. So I've been to Cuba a couple times, but the funniest Cuba story, and I'll tell this and then we can move along because I've got stuff to do as well. But at the old Navy base, which is now the prison in Guantanamo Bay, they had a golf course. And I'm not much of a golfer. I was on the golf, club or whatever when I was a teenager, but not now. So we're stuck for, a good week or two. So we decided to go play golf. Well, here's what happened was the Cuban government shut off the fresh water supply to the Navy base. So the golf course had no grass on it other than the tees and the greens. So you would hit the ball and it would land basically in this desert that looked like the surface of the moon. You would walk over and pick up your golf ball and put a piece of carpet down, put the golf ball back on the piece of carpet and hit it again. So the big joke was it was playing lunar golf, like playing golf on the moon. So there you go. There's my Cuba story, one of 2.
World traveler. We'll have to get you on for number 2. So as we like to finish the show, pimp thyself. How do people find your show? How do they find your outreach network and all that good stuff?
Well, I would first suggest that everybody go to the secularoutreach.com, and that will bring you to the entire network. And there's actually a secret URL to that. Did you know that you can actually get a .church domain name? And
I've heard that.
Yes. And Aaron up in Wyoming at Waiting for Wrath pointed that out when we were all on board for an audio conference trying to put this secular outreach together. And he goes, hey, we can get a .church. So the Secular Outreach Network owns fuckyour.church. So if you go to fuckyour.church, It brings you the Secular Outreach Network.
I'm not sure if I can put that in the show notes on iTunes. We'll have to find out.
Sure you can. But yeah, so that was a big deal. And of course, my show is listed through the Secular Outreach Network as well, or you can go directly if you don't want to learn about anybody else, which I really discourage. You should learn about everybody and then come to my show. But my show can be reached at inthenameofgodpodcast.com. And you can also find me on the Twitter sphere at Crime for God or Gmail, which is crimeforgod@gmail.com. And I guess in theory, you can find me on Facebook. But like I said before, the Facebook, there's some issues there where, because I don't use my real name, that people who disagree with me have ratted me out to Facebook more than once, and I've had my account suspended twice already. So Twitter and email is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, I forgot about how you seem to have a new name on Facebook every 3 days for a little while there. That's a lot of fun.
And you know the worst thing about that? The worst thing about that is it was another atheist podcaster.
That is just not right, I tell you.
Yeah.
So my turn as we close out. You can follow me on Twitter, as you can see in front of me. Zachrilege, Zachrilege. That's how to find me. You can like my Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all hate mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail. Thank you for Matthew for being on the show and blessing me with beer at Reason Con. I will not forget.
I forgot about that.
Share beer with somebody, a friend for life.
All right,
so I do want to emphasize that for all the joking I do in this show, I do give a shit. So if you're an atheist and you feel alone, you are not alone. Reach out. Let's chat and get that human connected with this thing going, and it keeps people coming back every Sunday. So I will say, stay skeptical, everybody.